so welcome back to Lex Reads. So in today's video, I wanted to do a list of books that I cannot stop thinking about years later. I got this idea from you guys when you filled out the like type of videos you guys want to see. And when I saw this, I said, this is perfect because I have read a lot of books, right? I mean, a lot of books. You guys know about my reading journey. And it started about, ooh, it started over 5 years ago. And when I first started getting into literature, it was African literature. And then, of course, it was all Black, which it still is all Black. But there have been some books over this reading journey that have stuck with me. And I only read them once, but I can never forget the characters. I can never forget the themes. I mean, you just can't forget them at all, right? So before we get started, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So the first book that I'm going to mention is Dust Child by Wing Fong Quay Mai. She's from Vietnam, and I read this book back in 2023. I did a reading vlog on this when I used to do my read a book in one day. I'll put that video down below. That's probably one of my favorite videos that I have created because not only do I, talk about the book and read it with you guys. Of course, no spoilers, but I have clips of the author talking about the book. I also have clips of people um, that were affected, you know, when it came to this story. This is set during the Vietnam War. You have two young girls. They are, I want to say, 15 and 16. Their family has some financial issues, and they have a cousin that tells them, you know, in order for you to get money to help your family, you can be a bar girl. The only thing you have to do is just sell tea to the GI soldiers. And it's more than just serving tea to soldiers, right? That's one story. Then you have another story where you have a man, he is an Aborigine, which Aborigines, they are biracial people. They are Vietnamese and then they are American. And you had a lot of soldiers where they would just sleep with those, women, and they would just discard them. And products of children, were produced. And you have a young man, he's been trying to get his green card, and it's just so difficult. So you see him. Then you see a man, this is like the present time. You see this young man, he was a soldier, back in Vietnam, and he wants to come back just to get some closure. Also, he's dealing with PTSD. He has a wife, and her thing is, look, our marriage is struggling, and in order for you to in order for us to make this work, like our last, resort is going back to Vietnam, and maybe you can just again have some closure, just get some things, you know, just get some things settled. But there's some secrets that he has not told his wife, back during those times. Because again, you have a lot of soldiers, they didn't talk about what went on. And of course, we know why. You can only imagine what they saw, heard, and everything. But there's three different perspectives. See three people's livelihoods. This book, I had every emotion. This is also in 2023, this made the list of my top books that year. That's how it was so good. And it was a random pick. I was looking for my next read. And you know how on Goodreads, they'll have like, if you read this book, you might like this book. And at first I thought it was an African novelist. But then when I read the synopsis, I said, oh, I have to read this. I have to. And again, going back to the video I did, I have soldiers actually talking about the women and how, did stuff they had no business doing. I also have, Aborigine children where, a lot of the women had to give up their, children because they couldn't afford, to take care of them. And y'all got to watch that video because it was one lady. She was a product of that. And she always wanted to know her mother. And she always said it was a piece missing. So when she got older, she finally went to Vietnam, and her mom had passed. But what made her feel a little bit better, she was able to meet her family. But what made her feel a little bit better is her mom was also searching for her. So they both were searching for each other. They said until the mom's last breath, she always talked about her daughter. She always wanted to find her. It just was, so difficult. So she did get a little bit of closure, there, but it was just, oh, my heart wept for that girl because you can only imagine. Next, oh Lord, A Little Life Behind Yanagihara. This book, I don't see how people read this book multiple times because there's no way that I personally can't. I read this book back in 2019. I remember I wanted to give myself a whole month, mainly because this book is like massive, right? And I had never read a book of that capacity before. So this book will also have a special place in my heart because it was the first book that I read of this amount, right? It was over 800 pages, but it wasn't daunting. It did not feel over 800 pages. This book, there's not really a moral to the story or a plot. You just have four young men. You follow them through the time they're in college all the way into their adulthood. But there's one character that you will never forget, which is Jude St. Francis. Jude St. Francis is he's deformed. He has just been discarded. I've never have read a character that has been, trauma is an understatement. Yeah, I don't, whew, especially in modern times, I would say. I haven't read a character in modern times that dealt with what Jude St. Francis dealt with and went through. And this book, this is also a book that I would not recommend people. And hear me out. If you're not a person, I would say read it with caution. If you're not a person that cannot take um, a lot of trauma, and when I say trauma, we're talking about sexual, emotional, physical, mental. We're talking about pedophilia, self harming, suicide. I think that might be it. Domestic violence. Everything that is just horrible is what happens to Jude St. Francis. This book was so gripping and powerful to me where I sometimes thought that Jude St. Francis was out in this world. And I'm like, girl, this man don't exist, baby. I had to, it took me over a month. I thought about this book. But at the same time, you know how when you have a book and you've read it and like you've tabbed it, and sometimes you might go back and maybe read like a passage that you tabbed or something like that. I tend to do that. I can't do that with this. This is a one and done. Um, but yeah, you just see again the four characters through they meet in college. They stay together, they stay connected. Oh yeah, this is a lot. This is a lot. And when you read what why Jude, when you really read what Jude goes through, oh Lord, yeah. Again, this is not a book I would just recommend. I honestly wouldn't, if I'm being honest. If someone asked me, "Have you read this book?" I would say, "Yes, I have." And they say, "Do you think I should read it?" I'm gonna say, "Read it with caution," and I'll tell them exactly what I just told y'all. Okay. Next, one of my favorites, y'all. Oh, she's one of my favorites from the Harlem Renaissance. Y'all know I got to throw a Harlem Renaissance book in here. Plum Bun, Jessie Redmond Fawcett. This was my first book I ever read by her. This is not her first book. She has four books, and I think I got one more to read by her. This author is beyond amazing. Also, if you have read Victoria Christopher Murray's book Harlem Rhapsody, that book is talking about, it's inspired by Jessie Redmond Fawcett. And if we didn't have this woman, we wouldn't have the Harlem Renaissance. We would not have the Harlem Renaissance. We wouldn't know authors, like Nella Larson, Langston Hughes. Can you imagine a world without Langston Hughes? Oh my gosh. She discovered them and published them. And this book, it, that like happily ever ending story and that giddiness you get, this book has that. And you would think like how? Because it's talking about race relations, it's talking about passing. You have two young girls, Angela and Virginia, I believe. And Angela can pass for white. And her mother also can pass for white. So they do these things where, they go on their little trips on the weekends and they go to the white side of town and they, go to stores and try on gloves and eat pastries and sit down and all of that. But the father and the sister of Virginia, they're my color, so they can't pass, right? Years later, the parents, they end up dying, and and Angela, she is an artist. She can draw and paint like nobody's business, right? And it's set in Jersey. And her thing is, I'm getting held back because, because of my race. And she doesn't, in Jersey, she doesn't tell people that she's black. They just assume that she's white. So when it was a scene where one of the girls was like, I didn't know that you were black. And she said, you never asked me, And her thing is, well, you didn't say anything. And she's like, well, when I meet you, you didn't say, hey, I'm a white woman. Nice to meet you. So her thing is, I'm going to have to leave in order for me to become who I want to become. And I'm going to pass because I can pass. But I can't stay in Jersey. So I'm going to go to New York. She goes to New York, passes as a white woman. But another hurdle has come upon her, and that is her gender. And it's like, the grass is not greener on the other side, you know what I mean? And she just allows herself to be in spaces that are just not good. Then her sister comes up to New York, but she keeps her distance from Virginia because, again, Virginia is black. So you can't really just see them talking, you know what I mean? Y'all, it's so much that I cannot tell y'all because, again, I would tell all the story. Please, please, please read this. This is such an amazing story. And it's like almost like a spy, novel because it's so many connecting parts and you were like, wait, you know what I mean? It's like that. And then you get the happy ever after, you get closure, you know what I mean? This story is amazing. She is known for this story. This is one of her best works, in my opinion. I also have 3 copies of this book. Yeah. Okay. Next is The Vanishing Half. Y'all, this book came out in 2020, I remember, but I read this book in 2022. And I have 2 copies of this book. This is my copy where I highlighted and tabbed it. And of course, I have another copy that is just really pretty and nice. If I really, really, really like a book, well, like is understatement. If I just head over heels for the book, I will get another copy. I haven't done it in a while because I haven't had any books so far. I've had some great reads, but they haven't been some there. I just have to get multiple copies, which is good for my pocketbook and this library. But this is a book where I have 2 copies. This story, if you like Harlem Renaissance stories, if you like stories about passing, you would like this book because it does remind me so much of, the Harlem Renaissance. It reminds me of A Passing by Nella Larson. Who else? Wallace Thurman, The Black of the Berry. Even Plum Bun, by Jesse Redmond Fawcett. If you like stories like that, you would love this book. I enjoyed this book so much. Oh, this book was amazing. And I remember I love this book so much where I ended up buying another book by the author, The Mothers, I believe it's called. Um, because I just wanted to read everything that this author, wrote. Britt Bennett. That this was her second book. If you guys can remember, back in 2020, this was on everybody's radar. This was on everyone's Instagram page. Like everyone was reading this. She actually was also featured in a scene in Insecure. Well, one of like the last seasons or whatever. When if you watch one of the episodes, it flashes really quickly, but Issa is outside of a bookstore. I think she's texting Lawrence, does a glance on Britt Bennett signing the books, and you see, her book. That's how popular this book was and how popular the story was. If you guys have not read this book, you need to read it. It is really, really good. I love this cover. Again, have 2 copies. Next is Donna Hill Rhythms. Y'all know how much I rant and rave about Donna Hill. This is my girl. She's one of my favorite authors. I don't think she gets a praise and recognition. This was the first book I ever read by her, and this is a story that you won't forget. You cannot forget Cora. You cannot forget Cora. And this book has a sequel to it also. I read this book back in 2022. And you got to read the first book. Read Rhythms. And then I'm telling y'all, after you read this book, You got to read the second book. I did not even know that there was a sequel to this book until I went on Goodreads, and I was looking for more, books by her, and I came across that and I said, "Wait, you telling me there's a sequel to this book?" Y'all, that day I ended up getting it and got it the next day from Amazon and read it in one day. That's how good it is. It is called What Mother Never Told Me. This is a prime example also too. I'm getting on a tangent, but you see this book, you would look at this cover and say, this ain't about nothing. Again, they do this for a reason with the black authors. But this story is not about nothing. This story, hands down, I'm y'all see I can't even talk. Okay. So first you have this book. This is also, if you like Vanishing Half, you would like this book. A woman named Cora. It's set in the 1920s, 1927 to be exact. She is from the South, Mississippi to be exact, PK. And her parents are heavy in the church. Her dad don't play. But she has a singing voice like nobody's business, y'all. She like up there with like Aretha, okay? And but she only knows the church. And her thing is, I want to explore more. Like I want to be able to sing. But their thing is, you're not gonna sing in no juke joints. You're gonna sing for the Lord. But tragically, her parents die, and her thing is, well, this might be my chance to do what I really want to do. So she goes to Chicago, I believe, and it's hard up there. Again, she doesn't know. She only knows Mississippi. She only knows her church life, her church family, and she needs work. So she becomes a domestic. Something horrible happens to her. Tragic happens to her. But she come back to Mississippi with a daughter named Emma. And then you learn about Emma's life. And Emma cannot stand Cora. She despises this woman like no other, right? Then you got another generation. You have Paris, who is Cora's granddaughter, who is Emma's daughter. Emma, when she gets grown, her thing is I'm leaving everybody. I don't care about nobody. So she leaves, but then something also horrible happens to her, tragic, happens to her. And she come back home and say, I need you to take care of my daughter. I need you to take care of Paris. And then you see Paris. And you see Paris grows up, but her thing is, what happened to my mother? Because she knows obviously Cora is her grandmother. But what happened? Why can't she stand you? And that's when the second book comes into play because you are going to be dealing with Paris and you're going to be dealing with Emma. So the granddaughter and the daughter. And yes, y'all, this story, hands down, again, you're never going to forget Emma. You're never going to forget Cora. You're never going to forget Paris, especially Emma. You're not going to forget her. You're not going to forget this story. Okay. Next. Oh, Lord. Lord, Lord, Lord. Y'all already probably know. Y'all already probably know. No shame in my game. I'm going to talk about this book forever until I'm no longer here. You hear me? I'm currently reading this book again. The first time I read this book in 2022, then I read it in 2023. Now I'm reading it in 2025. Phoebe Dolores Brown, you can never forget Phoebe Dolores Brown. It's undescribable how well crafted this book is, how this book feels like a movie when I read this book. You can see, you can taste, you can touch everything. I mean, you get all of the senses when you read this book. Sadiqa Johnson is an automatic buy. When you want a good historical fiction novel, you need to read Sadiqa Johnson. Next three are going to be by the same authors, and this is another author that is hands down my favorite. I've read all of her fictional books. I credit her for me getting back into reading, and that is Bernice L. McFadden, right? So you already know how much I rant and rave about Bernice L. McFadden. Okay, so the first book I read by Bernice L. McFadden was, I believe, the Book of Harlan. I listened to it and unbelievable. I read this book for the first time in 2020, and then our book club in 2023 for Lex Reads Book Club. We read it then and loved it. We all gave it a 5-star. I have this on audio and I have the physical book, and this is a multi-generational story. This also is talking about a young man that was in the Holocaust. Black men did not have any idea that black men were also in the Holocaust, and in the concentration camps, and horrible. Whew. What happens to Harlan? You won't forget. And his mom and his grandparents. Oh, Lord, Lord, Lord. I can't even tell you one of my favorite scenes in this book because it tells the tea. Oh, you're into historical fiction, you need to read this book. Another book by hers that I love, is probably my favorite book of all times, is Praise Song for the Butterfly. This is also a historical fiction novel. I read this book twice. I read this book in 2019, and I read it again in 2023. I have a reading blog on this. Read a book in one day. This is about the Chukasi system, which it is a um it's indentured servitude in Uganda, I believe that's where they practice it. It's basically modern day slavery. You know how like we have plantations where they call it a shrine, where you have a family member, you pay for their sins. So in this case, their financial state was horrible. So in order for things to get better, you pick a family member and they will again pay for your sins and you send them to the shrine. So it can be something like adultery, fornication, lying, financial, ruin. Abeo is 9 years old. Yeah. When she goes to that shrine and she stays there for 15 years. But she's able to get out, which is a miracle. And again, this is really happened. But overall, fantastic story. You do have to get your mind right. I would also encourage you guys to listen to this book. Robin Miles does the narration, which she is a goat. Another thing too, this book, it packs so much, right? It's so heavy, the storyline, it yet this is not even 300 pages. This book is 242 pages. Another book by her that, again, I would say if you never read Bernice McFadden, I would start with this book, which is Sugar. This is her debut novel. I also have a reading vlog for this book. This book I read in 2019 and I read in 2023. This book kind of gives you a little bit, but it's still on its own. It gives you a little bit of Sula, but Sula and Sugar, they're different, obviously. But if you like that kind of loose, fast, don't take nothing from nobody, you probably will like this book. Again, it's in its own league, I would have to say. But you have a woman named Sugar Lacey. Y'all can't forget the Lacey's. You have a woman named Sugar Lacey. Sugar Lacey is a sex worker, basically. She's a prostitute. Um, and you have a woman named Pearl. Pearl is a church going woman. She's married. She has children. Two different perspectives, vast perspectives, right? But they become friends because they become neighbors. And you would think, like, these two women, what? Y'all, this book is so good. And this book, when I talk about it, every time I talk about it, it makes me want to sit down and read it again. Y'all got to watch my reading vlog of this book. So good. Again, if you like them little fast women like a Shug Avery, a Sula, you will like this book. There also is a sequel to this book, which is this one, This Bitter Earth. This one, this 5 stars. This one, because it's Bernice McFadden, her writing is fantastic. I would give it a 4 star. The writing is amazing, but I care for this one a little bit better. I honestly say you don't even need to read This Bitter Earth if you just want to know a little bit more. I would say read that, but you honestly don't even need to read that story. You just need to read this. The last book that I can never forget is Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I'm always going to mention Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie because when it came to African literature, she was my first. That also, from her personality, you would think like she writes really serious, like critical analysis nonfiction. Because if y'all heard the way Chimamanda articulates herself, like she's polished. She knows her things. But she writes love stories. She writes love stories. So don't be intimidated by her. I was telling my sister that because she like them interviews you be watching and talking, about she real, it's just so like intellectual where it's like, girl, please let's just talk. You know what I mean? Let's not make it into a lesson. But her writing is not like that. She is going to teach you some things, but it's not going to be like, like you reading again a critical analysis. No, she writes love stories. This is a love story. You have two young people. They're from Nigeria. They meet in Nigeria. They get older and they, go to one stays in, one goes to the United States to go to university, one goes to the UK, and they're trying to just navigate their lives, their professional lives, their personal lives, but they have this connection. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's a love story. It honestly is a love story. She also, if you are an American, especially a Black American, she makes you think of your Americanness. She makes you aware of it and some of the customs that we have. She makes you be like, oh, that's how we be. That's what when you read this book. Yeah. Like for example, when we're in a store and if someone asks, who helped you today? We're not gonna say, oh, the Black girl helped us or the white girl helped us. We'll say this young lady. You know what I mean? And maybe look at her or point or, something like that, right? Family was in the store. She didn't understand why we were going through this rigmarole of seeing who helped the person because, they asked, who helped you? And she said, oh, the young lady with the purple shirt. And it was like, okay, there's multiple people with a purple shirt. And she was asking her again, well, how did she look? How did her, oh, she had, braids or whatever. And I'm familiar looking like the Black girl. That's who helped us, unspoken rules, that you don't say. But she does make you aware of that if you are American. But yeah, this book is a conversational piece. This will also be a very good book for a book club. But yeah, guys, that is it when it comes to this video of books that I think about. These books, as you know, I've read them twice. I own multiple copies of them. Overall, they're just great, solid books. And again, the characters are memorable. Yeah, but that's all I have for you guys. And I'll be back with more Black books. Bye.